Tonight, ambush in the Oval Office.
Death, 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 horrible death, death.
Donald Trump confronts the South African president with unsubstantiated allegations about what he calls the genocide of white farmers.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately, through criminal activity are not only white people. Majority of them are black people.
The South African president there trying to push back. So are white farmers in his country being executed, as Donald Trump suggests? After another extraordinary afternoon in Washington tonight, we'll try to get some answers. Also coming up, no flour, no food, no water as millions of Gazans wait for aid. Here, the Prime Minister continues his condemnation but refuses to stop supplying parts for Israeli jets. We'll hear from a former Foreign Secretary on what the government should do next.
Every hour counts. It's an absolutely abominable level of suffering. What counts now is not language, it's actions.
Plus, like the Olympics, but on steroids, how big tech is changing what it means to be human. We'll speak to the founder of the Enhanced Games. And I'll hear live from the man who can play online chess using only his thoughts after being fitted with Elon Musk's Neuralink chip. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. I want to begin the programme tonight at the Oval Office. Donald Trump has hosted several world leaders there since he returned to the White House. But this one was much different. It started off cordially with a handshake and the usual strained diplomatic small talk about resetting relationships. Then this happened. Have a look.
Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you. Those people were all killed.
There must be killing because the killing is part of a revolutionary act.
Well, as you heard there, the US president turned down the lights and turned the tables on his South African counterpart, playing a video of an opposition politician who has made the seizing of land without compensation his campaign message. Just last week, Donald Trump granted refugee status to these families, who are now starting their new lives in the US. And he seized on reports that white farmers are being executed. So what do we know? Well, the data shows that white South Africans are not being killed at a higher rate than black South Africans. The South African government denies any claims of a white genocide, and after the country's history of apartheid, attempts are being made to rebalance land ownership. But Donald Trump is sticking to what he believes. He is prioritising refugees from South Africa over those fleeing war in Sudan, gang violence in South America, or the Taliban in Afghanistan. Lots to get through tonight. Let's get started, though, with this report from Ashish Joshi in Washington.
A White House welcome for a president looking for friendship. Trailed as talks for new trade agreements and a chance to reset relations between the United States and South Africa.
Thank you very much for being here.
Cyril Ramaphosa wanted to talk business.
Thank you very much.
And with golfing royalty Ernie Els and Retief Goosen among the South African delegation appealing to Trump's favourite pastime. It started off friendly enough, but the situation quickly derailed.
What will it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that for the president. It's for him. No, seriously.
I'd rather have him answer.
Yeah, I'd rather answer that. It will be.
Our president will respond to you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. President.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans.
Another ambush of a visiting dignitary.
Turn the lights down. Turn the lights down.
This film, a montage of rallies held by the Communist Opposition Party, chanting for the deaths of white farmers.
Death, death, death. They're saying that kill the white farmer and take their land.
Cyril Ramaphosa tried as hard as he could to stay diplomatic.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy.
Elon Musk looked on silently. He's been amplifying the claims of genocide on his social media platform. But he didn't need to say anything here. The president's attack on South Africa was complete. Cyril Ramaphosa came here knowing that he'd be in for a really hard time trying to convince Donald Trump that his claims of a genocide in South Africa was simply not true. But the South African president could not have expected a Zelensky-style ambush here in the Oval Office of the White House.
Welcome to the United States of America.
The Afrikaner families who sought refuge in America earlier this year have had their claims fast-tracked, whilst other refugees fleeing war have been denied entry. Their cause has now blown up on a world stage that even they would have not thought possible. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Washington.
And we do have Ashish with us here, and we'll be speaking to him in a moment. But first, let's go to our Africa correspondent, Yusra Elbegir, who joins me from Johannesburg. And Yusra, I mean, a lot was said. It does feel like Zelensky 2.0, and we'll go to that in a moment. But just from your perspective and from where you are, how was it firstly received on the ground? And secondly, I mean, is there any evidence around these claims that Donald Trump is making?
Everyone here has been watching this meeting extremely closely, Yalda. People have been waiting for Ramaphosa, once Mandela's chief negotiator, to go in and save the day and salvage the deteriorating bilateral relations with the US that have hit every sector, from the humanitarian sector to trade, in Africa's most industrialized nation. Now, his calm demeanor, Ramaphosa, was kind of punctured with these moments of interjection that were mostly dismissed by President Trump. But ultimately, he was there to defend a genocide that has been consistently debunked. There is no evidence to show that farmers, let alone white farmers, are disproportionately killed in South Africa's harrowing murder rate of close to 7,000 people who were murdered in the last 3 months of 2024. Only 12 of those people were farmers. And we don't even know if they were all white farmers. They're expected to be mostly black farmers, since black laborers predominantly work on farms here. The 7% of the population who is white owns more than half of the land. That is the legacy of apartheid. And that's what consistently is presented as a counter argument, that white South Africans have benefited economically disproportionately to black South Africans, who mostly live in unemployment, in poverty, and who are still reeling from the systematic inequality that was entrenched during the apartheid era. So this is almost a culmination of arguments that have been consistently put forward by white South Africans who have felt alienated by a black government, who, even as white-led opposition have made their way into government, feel like they need leverage. And that leverage, since January, since Trump was inaugurated, is coming from one of the highest offices in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashish, we'll bring you in, because on the one hand, President Trump is almost predictable. You know, he likes to put on a show. He likes to bring in these world leaders. And we saw what happened with President Zelensky. This was quite a show, though. I mean, to turn off the lights, to bring out those images, it was quite extraordinary to watch this kind of attempt to humiliate again quite publicly.
It was painful for us to watch. I can't imagine what it would have been like in the room for the South African delegation. It was very carefully orchestrated. They knew exactly what to say and what to do and when to do it. As soon as the first questions went out to the waiting reporters, the first question was about the genocide that Donald Trump is claiming taking place inside South Africa. We knew that was going to be the headline today, but potentially there was going to be some more talk from the Americans about South Africa's stance on Israel and taking Israel to the International Court. But that didn't even get raised, because as soon as the lights were dimmed on command from President Donald Trump, a film montage of these rallies that have been taking place in South Africa from minority groups, the opposition, the Communist Party, and we know that these chants have been heard before, death to the Boer, death to the farmer. But Donald Trump seized on that, and then he produced this dossier of news cuttings without any attribution, showing that these farmers had been butchered, had been beheaded, and it was just one claim after another. Credit to Cyril Ramaphosa. What he didn't do was you could see he was getting really uncomfortable. You know, there was the wiping of the brow and the loosening of the collar, but he stayed calm. He didn't rise to the challenge. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he just kept trying to bring the conversation back to trade and to business, things Donald Trump wants to talk about. And he knows that he has to come here, and to reset that balance with Donald Trump, perhaps he had to endure that humiliation, hoping they can walk away from the cameras now and try and restore this relationship that until very recently these two countries used to have.
Yeah, indeed. Ashish, thank you, and Yusra, both of you, for that update. I'm joined now by Callie Creel, Chief Executive of civil rights organisation AfriForum. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. I just want to get your reaction to what we saw this afternoon take place in the Oval Office.
Yes, good evening to you. Well, we've seen in South Africa denialism with regard to real problems that we have, the real threat to property rights, the real human rights abuses that we are seeing targeting the farming community, the real alignment with South Africa, with countries like Iran. Those are real problems, and South Africa thought that they could get away with simply sweeping it under the carpet, ascribing this to misinformation. And I think they failed. And I think this created now the circumstances for further discussions. I'm happy that the discussions didn't break down. There can now be discussions, but the real issues are on the table, and those should be solved. And today laid a firm basis towards that.
When you talk about the real issues, do you mean, these claim after claim of genocide and executing farmers? Frankly, these are all being debunked by the professionals, by those who are looking at the data and collecting the data, are saying this isn't actually happening.
Well, we are probably the organization that keeps the best data with regard to that, but I think this is the problem. In no other category of crime in our country are there efforts to debunk it. I think this is very insensitive to people that are being tortured, that dies, and by trying to downplay this. The serious problem is you have somebody making genocidal calls based on ethnicity, kill the Boers, which are Afrikaners. And it's not just some fringe population.
And I appreciate what you're saying, but when the President of the United States calls it genocide, and it is being debunked, I don't think anyone is ruling any of that out, but the murder of farmers is less than 1% of all of the cases. And South Africa, as the President said, has a high rate of violent crime, and about 27,000 murders are recorded each year, but less than 1% of those are farmers.
Yes, I think in terms of proportionality, remember, only a small group of the population are farmers, but the chances of being killed if you're a farmer are 3 to 4 times higher than a normal population. But of course, it does not mean farmers' lives are more important than other lives. But what makes farm murders different? This is the only category of crime in the country where there's an open call for people to be killed. And the president doesn't condemn it. He cannot say this is a small party. That leader was within the ANC, and the ANC even went to court to defend Julius Malema in 2011.
I'm just looking again at the data, and it says there were 32 farm murders in 2024. That's down from 50 in 2023 and 43 in 2022. And that's according to the Transvaal Agricultural Union of South Africa.
That figure is higher, of course, 47. But the problem is, why should it be downplayed? We've got a problem with violence against women and children, and we all fight against that. to say now, but there's also other violence, we shouldn't focus on that. But as I've said, there's a call for genocide. What we are seeing disproportionately is that people are being tortured without anything stolen. An electric drill used to bore a hole into an old lady's feet. Blow torches being used to hurt people, hot irons being used, boiling water being used. And what we only ask is, like many other crimes in the country, make it a priority crime. In South Africa, the gang violence, which is a serious problem, also disproportionately high, government has made that, rightfully so, a priority crime. Crime against women and children is also a priority crime. Even rhino poaching is a
Yes,
priority.
I mean, I think ultimately the
murders to also be a priority crime, and government refuses. All we hear is the president saying there's no farm murders.
So, Kelly, I mean, you know, we've unfortunately run out of time, but I think the case that you're making is it shouldn't be downplayed. The accusations of genocide have been debunked, that crime rate is high in South Africa, and all of these cases should be taken seriously. Kelly Creel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Now, we've been covering the growing condemnation of Israel's actions in Gaza all week. The withholding of aid and the continued bombardment has been described by the government here as intolerable, monstrous and cruel. But this evening, as the people of Gaza wait for humanitarian assistance to reach them, the Israeli Prime Minister doubled down on his pledge to continue with his war until all parts of the Strip are under Israeli control. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports.
When the IDF issues evacuation orders, Gazans only have a few hours to move. This was Khan Yunis. It's now mostly a combat zone. Our team filmed these pictures as they too were fleeing for safety.
يقفوا معانا يضغطوا على اسرائيل كلهم اصطمت على دارهم حطوا خلصوا فيهم متكممات بدهم يشحكوا خايفين على كراسيهم.
الله طلبوا منا اخلاء وين اخلينا؟ هاي المره 20 بنخلي.
طب وين رايحين؟ كيف؟
على البحر. على البحر. والله زي ما انت شايف على رجلينا ماشيين، 15 كيلو ماشيين على رجلينا.
The effort of pushing his nephew in a wheelchair through the sand and in the heat is exhausting. His knees buckle and he collapses with exhaustion. The mental and physical strength needed to repeatedly pack up and move is just too much for some.
وين الدول وين العالم احنا بنموت ولادنا بموتوا طفله زي هاي تحمل شوك حرام عليكم حرام عليكم نموت.
This was the scrum for food at a soup kitchen near Gaza City today. They get one bowl each to feed a family for an entire day. Nearby, an airstrike hit as people were queuing to make bread at a bakery. Israel is now allowing a limited level of aid in, but the UN says that very little has actually been distributed and hundreds of trucks are needed.
WFP is doing everything possible to get the necessary permissions and clearances to bring in at least 100 trucks a day, with emergency food and other aid in the coming days.
Tonight in a press conference, Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledged the need for aid to get into Gaza, but was defiant about Israel's ultimate goal, to control Gaza.
Our forces are capturing more and more territory, eliminating and clearing out Hamas terrorists. All of the Gaza Strip will be under the security control of Israel.
Western opposition to Israel's offensive has hardened considerably in recent days and won't be helped by the IDF firing warning shots at Western diplomats, including a British delegation in the West Bank town of Jenin today. The IDF said that it would investigate, but a number of European countries have demanded an immediate explanation. In northern Gaza, 2 airstrikes hit a family home and a shelter. 22 people were killed, half of them women and children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. 2 children, aged 7 and 2, lie side by side in the morgue. The IDF said it gave warnings, and they were targeting a Hamas command center. The Israeli Air Force has struck 115 sites in Gaza over the last 24 hours. Ground troops and the Israeli Navy have also carried out attacks. The death toll is still rising dramatically as the IDF operations continue to escalate. Alistair Bungle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
So Netanyahu defiant tonight, despite a threat of sanctions from the UK, France and Canada. Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn has been looking at the issues of British arms sales and what the UK currently sends to Israel.
The UK has taken its most forceful steps against Israel since the start of the Gaza war, suspending free trade talks and sanctioning settlers in the West Bank. But what about arms sales? Could Britain be doing more to restrict exports to Israel? This graph shows what Britain has been supplying in recent years. It shows the value of approved licences, relatively steady rate over the past few years. But in the last 3 months of last year, there was a big increase, more than £127 million of arms sent to Israel. That is more than the total for the previous 3 years. So how did that happen? Much of the increase appears to be replacing parts for existing systems rather than entirely new arms. And there may have been a catch-up effect after the fall in exports during the pandemic years. But there are certainly questions for the government to answer, especially given the timing. Because the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, had said in September that the UK was suspending around 30 of 350 licences over concerns the equipment could be used to breach international law. The suspended licences include those providing components for military aircraft, including fighter jets, helicopters and drones, which are all used for attacks in Gaza. The UK is continuing to approve items which it assessed are not directly used in Gaza, including training aircraft, naval equipment and communication equipment. Most controversially, an exemption was made allowing the continued supply of parts for F-35 fighter jets, including ejector seats and targeting lasers. The government is facing a High Court legal challenge on this, with opponents saying F-35s are a key part of Israel's aerial war on Gaza. Britain says withholding those parts would disrupt the entire global supply chain for F-35, saying the programme is vital to the security of the UK and its allies.
Why does he think it's OK for the UK to continue to sell Israel the equipment for the fighter jets to drop bombs on these starving children?
What we contribute into a pot is parts for fighter jets. They're not sold directly, they go into a pot. If we were to stop that, they wouldn't then be available to others around the world who desperately need them in the conflicts they're engaged in. And that's why we won't do it.
Lawyers for the British government in that F-35 court case argued there is no evidence of a genocide being committed in Gaza, putting them at odds with some other observers, or that the Israeli military has deliberately targeted women or children, even if tens of thousands have been killed. But the British government has said the new Israeli offensive in Gaza is morally unjustifiable and is clearly worried about talk from Israeli ministers of cleansing Gaza. The action it's taking against Israel is unlikely to be the last if the situation there continues to deteriorate.
That was our Dominic Waghorn. Well, I've been speaking in the past half an hour to former Foreign Secretary and President of the International Rescue Committee, David Miliband. I asked for his assessment of the comments from governments in the UK, France and Canada this week and asked if it was all too little too late. Just have a listen to our conversation.
I think the most important thing at the moment is that every hour counts. It's an absolutely abominable level of suffering inside Gaza, and it's a preventable level of suffering. I think that the circumstances on the ground, we're an international humanitarian agency, we have teams on the ground, we have partners on the ground, but they can't do their job. And what's more, they report out of absolutely dire circumstances that bring a human dimension to the UN statistics that no doubt you've heard, which is that 1 in 5 of the population, so 500,000 people, face famine. And this is a judgment from an independent assessment of the situation on the ground. So what counts now is not language, it's actions to address this highly preventable situation, which at the moment is afflicting over 2 million people.
David, what action do you think needs to now be taken? Because I mean, I was speaking to one of the presidents of Oxfam on the programme yesterday, who said that frankly the arms that the UK is selling to Israel, that needs to stop immediately.
Well, the action that I'm concerned about is action to save lives. Now we have 27 pallets, IRC pallets of medicines and nutritional supplements waiting to come in. So what needs to happen now is the opening of the crossings to humanitarian goods and also to commercial goods. We know that in the 6 weeks of the ceasefire, there was significant improvement in the living conditions of people inside Gaza. It wasn't the full solution by any manner of means. When the crossings were closed 11 weeks ago, it started the descent into the kind of hell that you're reporting at the moment. And so the absolute priority, and I can confirm this from conversations with our own teams on the ground, lives are at stake now. Tom Fletcher, the UN coordinator, the man who's in charge of global humanitarian efforts, said that 14,000 children's lives are on the line. I mean, I haven't got that. I can't give you that overall picture. I can give you the specifics from what our teams are seeing, and they confirm absolutely dire needs. And so what counts now is opening up those crossings so that the material gets in there, but also the water supplies, the electricity, to make sure that these people are able to stay alive and establish some degree of sustainability.
60,000 dead. As you say, Tom Fletcher says that in the next 48 hours or so, if that much-needed aid doesn't enter Gaza, we could see the death of 14,000 children. You and I spoke about a year ago, and at that time you were warning about the risk of famine, and you were urging global leaders to do more. When I put that to Israeli officials, when I say David Miliband is saying this, Cindy McCain is saying this, Tom Fletcher is saying this, they dismiss it and say, well, they don't have the facts on the ground and there is sufficient aid getting into Gaza, even though we know that from about the end of February through to this period now, the people of Gaza have not received much-needed aid and that there is a blockade.
Well, you're right. And the facts that I'm giving you from the ground are right as well. And the proof of that is that when the aid supplies started coming in, the human conditions improved. Of course, there's another point here. The concern about looting and diversion of aid, the more aid you get in, the less valuable each item of aid is. So we're stuck in the most vicious of vicious circles at the moment. We need to get out of it. That's the critical thing. And the fact that when there was the ceasefire for 6 weeks, it did deliver improvements. When the flow of aid was stopped because the ceasefire was over and then added to the curtailment of aid flows, as well as commercial flows, we've had the kind of needs skyrocketing. Malnutrition is skyrocketing for a very simple reason. There isn't food to feed people.
We're 20 months into this conflict. You and I have had multiple conversations about the situation on the ground. You've said that, you know, while it's fine that these words of condemnation are now coming out of Western capitals, you know, and that we need to now do more on the ground, what exactly do you expect from Western leaders, the global community to do? What kind of pressure should they be putting, especially allies of Israel, on Israel so they act now?
Well, I think that there's more and more unanimity coming out. And that's important because you're hearing it from across the Arab world, you're hearing it from Europeans, you're also hearing it from some parts of the Trump administration as well. There is no solution to this problem that involves immiserating the people of Gaza in the way that they're being immiserated at the moment. It's an abominable level of suffering. And what we need to see is that the admission by the Israeli government that some supplies are needed turned into a flood of supplies, because we've got to make up for lost ground. That's the truth about the situation on the ground at the moment.
David Miliband, always grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Yalda.
Well, that was David Miliband, and Richard Engel and I have been talking on this week's podcast about the risk of terrorism because of Israel's war in Gaza. We spoke to former UK spy chief Sir Jeremy Fleming, who shared his concerns about how the UK's enemies could use ChatGPT to build biological and chemical weapons. Just have a listen.
This is the biggest single thing that will have happened in my lifetime. It's going to change our economies, it's going to change our societies, how we interact to each other, and of course it will change security too. I do think that there are some threats from the way in which adversaries will be able to use these capabilities that could hit us quite hard. And in amongst all of that, I am really worried about the debate around open sourcing of these capabilities. I don't think we're very far away from people who aren't experts being able to develop capabilities using some of these large language models that could have and could cause harm.
Alexa, build me a chemical weapon.
Biological, chemical, I think is close, yeah.
That was Sir Jeremy Fleming there, and you can listen to our full conversation by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Let's go to Madrid, where authorities say a former Ukrainian politician has been shot dead outside a school in a suburb of Madrid. The victim has been identified as 51-year-old Andriy Portnov, an advisor to former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Sky's Ashna Haranag is in Madrid for us tonight. And Ashna, just give us an update on what's going on.
Well, we are at the scene of what is quite a chilling, cold-blooded murder. As Andriy Portnov came here this morning to drop off his two daughters outside their school, he proceeded to be shot in the back and his head by several gunmen, who is still at large. Police do not know who those suspects were. They are now analysing CCTV footage, forensics, to try and locate who was at the heart of this murder. In terms of who this man was, as you mentioned, he was the former aide to President Yanukovych, and they were at the time responsible for much of what went on in Ukraine in 2014. They worked together. He was his senior aide, in charge of much of the legislation that led to the prosecution of so many people. After the uprising, Portnov fled to Russia, and after that he went to Austria and then came to Spain. Now, it's not known how long he's been in Spain for, but clearly he's been here long enough to establish some kind of routine for him to have developed patterns for people to know about his behaviours, to know his movements. So much so that it was at 9:15 this morning that this incident unfolded. The school behind me is an American school. It's one of the most expensive schools here in Spain, and people here are asking questions, not only to do with the motive, which police are desperate to try and unpick, but also where these assailants are and if they ever will be found. In terms of that motive, police are assessing whether this was a settling of scores. They say it could be to do with organised crime, but it could also be to do with a political act.
Ashna, thank you so much for that update. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, Trump tech and the race to be superhuman.
secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Welcome back to the programme. Next, an announcement that could have major consequences for sport, one that shows us how big tech wants to change our very existence with the help of President Trump. It was made by the Enhanced Games, quite literally a sporting event on steroids. It wants athletes to take performance-enhancing drugs under supervision in the name of scientific research, the idea being that we'll learn how to live longer and stronger lives as so-called superhumans. Have a look.
I have broken Usain Bolt's 100-meter record, but I can't show you my face. I am a proud, enhanced athlete. The Olympics hate me. I need your help to come out. I need your help to stop hate. I need your help for the world to embrace science.
When that video was released 2 years ago, sports chiefs labelled Enhanced Games a clown show that would put athletes' health at risk. Even the Biden administration condemned it. But then, when Donald Trump returned to office, everything changed. His son, Trump Jr., became an investor and said MAGA was all in. Another backer is the billionaire Peter Thiel. If you don't know him, he previously worked with Elon Musk and advised President Trump on tech. He's also credited with bankrolling J.D. Vance's path into politics. So now the Enhanced Games has direct links to the White House. It's part of a bigger trend of President Trump being charmed by tech bosses. The most high profile, of course, is Elon Musk, a man with his own ambitions to change humanity. Later, we'll hear from the man who agreed to have a chip inserted into his brain by Musk's company, Neuralink.
There's nothing to be afraid of with that. The surgery was super easy. I literally was released from the hospital a day later.
Actually, can you pause the song just for the audio coming through? And that was also done with your brain?
Yep.
We're going to look into the ethics of that shortly, but first, I've been speaking to Aaron D'Souza, founder of Enhanced Games. Tonight, he announced the first ever Enhanced Games would be held in Vegas in exactly 1 year's time. So what does he want to achieve? Just have a listen.
We want to allow science and technology to be completely free. The stated goal of the Enhanced Games is to allow everyone to become enhanced. Not just athletes, use the latest science and technology to improve human performance on every level. As far as I can analyze, in every industry across the entire world, science is allowed, except for sports.
I guess your critics have said that, sports people are seen as, role models in society. They're clean. They perform and work really hard to be able to get to the elite level that they're at. Are you saying, actually, we're not talking about those people, we're talking about regular people taking certain substances and being able to participate in your Enhanced Games?
Well, do you think a writer who uses ChatGPT or another AI tool is cheating?
They're not necessarily using the skills and the craft that they have developed. They're getting help.
Exactly. They're using technology as an assistance to make them a more productive and contributory member of society.
Does it make them the best, though, in the world? That's the whole point of the Olympics and various sporting events, that you are looking at someone who's worked their entire life to get to a certain level without assistance versus someone who has tried to get help.
I think the best analogy to use is Formula One. So Formula One, according to the Olympics definition, is not a sport, because it involves engineered excellence. But I think if you talk to Lewis Hamilton or another Formula One driver, they are an athlete. But they're an athlete working together with engineers to create amazing performances. The Enhanced Game is the athlete and the scientists collaborating.
So where has the support come from in terms of the MAGA team come from?
Because the Trump movement in general believes in technological innovation. They're very skeptical of legacy institutions. And in particular, they're skeptical of what I call the alphabet soup. WEF, the WHO, NATO, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. European-based, European-run institutions that are unaccountable, that are globalist and left-leaning, but that are paid for by the US taxpayer. All of these institutions are being questioned right now. Obviously, NATO is the most obvious of those, but at the same...
These are also institutions that America built and backed and funded.
Exactly. America built, backed, and funded them, but they've been headquartered in Europe, and the European ideals are now very different from the American ideals. And we see this in technology, right? We are a technology project, right? We're an experiment in technology, and that is supported in the United States. The European worldview, which we see in artificial intelligence, most obviously, is to regulate.
So just so I can get to the heart of this, no regulation, anyone can take any kind of substance and perform?
No. Let's be very clear. This is not a free-for-all. All sports require a rule set, right? There have to be rules to a competition. And we adopted these rules, our rules, it's called the First Declaration on Human Enhancement, at Oxford University last December. And the first principle, the most important principle, is the freedom of choice. My body, my choice, your body, your choice. Adults with free and informed consent can do to their body what they wish. However, the important corollary to that is they must respect national laws, where they're from and where they're competing. And if you meet those two criteria, there's about 8 other rules, then it is possible to engage in the enhanced games.
Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That was Aaron D'Souza there on his hopes for next year's inaugural Enhanced Games. Now, set to be staged in America next year, the same host nation as the next Olympic Games. Well, throughout this controversy, voices within the anti-doping community have said not to give the Enhanced Games oxygen. But now, with backing from the White House, can it be ignored? Well, joining me now is two-time Olympian Noah Hoffman. Thank you so much, Noah, for joining me on the program. As I said, you're two-time Olympian. You've played at the highest elite level in sporting. Would you ever be tempted by any of this, or do you know anyone who might be at your level who might want to take part in this?
Absolutely not. This is not, the Enhanced Games is counter to everything that I loved about sport. It's counter to the reasons that I entered sport. I entered sport because I wanted to be the best that I could be personally, my body, without medical enhancement, without taking medical risks. It's counter to the ideals of inspiring young people to be able to set and achieve goals without needing to have the best doctors, without needing to take risks with their bodies. This is not what I sought out in sport, and I don't think what many other high-level, serious athletes are seeking out in sport.
Yeah, I mean, I put that to Aaron D'Souza. I said that, you know, young people, children are often encouraged to look up to, you know, sports people and to try and work their entire lives to get there naturally. One of his arguments was that when 44% of athletes already use performance enhancements, it's time to celebrate this and celebrate science and try and better understand what these drugs do to the body.
So I thought that Aaron actually said it best when he said, this is a technology project and an experiment in technology. This is not about sport. This is not about athletes. They are using athletes. They're bribing athletes with large amounts of venture money as prize money to take risks with their bodies so they could perform a science experiment on the athletes. That is not what we want our young people to be doing, to teaching them that they have to risk long-term health consequences in order to compete at the highest level of sport. And if the idea is that the anti-doping system as it is currently constructed is not working, we agree at Global Athlete, we agree completely, I agree completely. We've seen that with the Chinese doping scandal. We've seen that with the Skinner case in tennis recently, that the system is not working and treating athletes fairly. The answer is not to get rid of anti-doping. The answer is not to get rid of fair and equitable sport. The answer is to make a regulatory system that works. And that is not this, and scrapping the entire system is not it.
Noah, do you think this now sort of muddies the water? 2 years ago, it was seen as some kind of clown show. I mean, it was laughed away. Now with Donald Trump, his son, the tech bros, MAGA, sort of getting behind this idea. Do you think this is going to do long-term damage to the idea of the Olympics, to the Games, to children performing and having something to aspire to, just the whole nature of how things have been done for so long?
So my hope, and maybe I'm overly optimistic, but my hope is that this can do the opposite, that this can galvanize the clean sport movement and say that the Olympic movement and international sport as it currently exists is going to be the opposite of the enhanced games. We are going to refocus our efforts on a global anti-doping system that lives up to its ideals, that punishes athletes who cheat, but does not inadvertently catch up athletes who don't, that treats every athlete fairly, that doesn't let athletes get away with cheating because of their nationality or because they're part of a state-sponsored system. If we can have a global anti-doping system that works, then maybe people will see that that is a far better alternative, that that actually promotes the ideals of sport and inspires young people and promotes accomplishment of the human body that people love to witness and watch, and that the enhanced games can be kind of the counterpoint that motivates a system that works for athletes.
Noah, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we touched on at the start of this segment, this isn't just a story about sport, but about superhumanity. One person already living our potential future is Noland Arbach. In 2024, 8 years after he was paralysed, he became the first human to be fitted with a brain chip via Elon Musk's Neuralink. The chip allows him to play computer games with his thoughts alone. Have a look.
I'd like to introduce you to the first ever user of the Neuralink device. And I think you're my only telekinetic friend that I have.
Yeah, I hope so.
Actually, can you pause the song just for the audio coming through? And that was also done with your brain?
Yep. I could get it to move wherever I wanted, just stare somewhere in the screen and it would move where I wanted it to.
Brain chips in other patients have allowed people to walk again. So despite the ethical concerns, there are also clear benefits to helping someone told they could never walk again get back on their feet. So should we be celebrating developments in this field? Well, let's bring in Noland, who joins us now. And Noland, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Just give our audiences a sense of what your life was like before you had this chip inserted.
It was just difficult to do just about anything. It was hard to interact with the world in any sort of meaningful way. I didn't really have a whole lot of purpose. I didn't really know how I could thrive in the world or be a functioning member of society in any sort of way. I know that other quadriplegics and other people who have paralyzed have found a way, but it was just really difficult for me. Before everything, I didn't really do a whole lot before I was implanted.
Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary watching your video there. You know, your mind, the chip, sort of playing games, video games, chess. I mean, clearly it's changed your life completely. Just tell us how you came across this and how you were able to get this Neuralink chip inserted.
Yeah, it was kind of a random happenstance. So one of my buddies called me one morning, and there's a pretty fun story behind that, but I don't think he likes me to tell it, so I'll refrain from that this time. He called me one morning as he was Googling some Elon Musk stuff. I think he was Googling like SpaceX, and came across that Neuralink had just opened up human trials that day. And he called me, said, "You want to get a chip in your brain?" And I was like, "Sure, I got nothing better going on." And he walked me through what it was, gave me like a 5-minute rundown. We applied online, and it's a really interesting sort of juxtaposition between like where I was then and where I am now. I couldn't even apply on my own online. I needed help with that. So over the phone, he asked me questions. I answered them, made a bunch of jokes on the application because there was no thought in my mind that I would get selected So I asked for like an Iron Man suit. I said I wanted to be in the Matrix, you know, just random stuff like that. Just kind of joking around. And then I heard back, and within a month, I did a bunch of interviews, a bunch of screenings, got like full body scans, full brain scans, did it all. There were things I had no control over. And by the grace of God, everything just sort of aligned. 4 months after I applied, I was getting brain surgery.
Yeah, it's extraordinary because you're a part of only a handful of people on the planet right now who are able to do this. I mean, obviously there are other companies doing other things, but this is about Neuralink. I just wonder about some of the ethical concerns around this, because obviously what you're thinking is being stored somewhere. The data is being stored somewhere and collected. Are you concerned at all in any way that perhaps, you know, your thoughts can be controlled as well, and therefore you can be controlled?
I think it's something that we need to consider along the way. I'm not going to sit here and say that there are no concerns moving forward. I'm not concerned at this point. I mean, with my chip, it only reads, it doesn't write. So what I mean by that is it is receiving signals. It can't send any signals into my brain. So as far as like controlling my thoughts, controlling my brain in any way, it's just not capable of that right now. It is something that they are implementing in the future, is being able to write into the brain. There are things that they're working on, like blind sight, to help people who have never seen be able to see again, people who are blind. And so I think moving forward, there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had around this. A lot of legislation, I think, would help. And then just activists outside of that who will champion this and really make sure that, you know, this data, like you said, it goes somewhere. Someone is reading it, and who does it belong to, and what are they allowed to do with it? I think these are things that we need to talk about. Right now, I'm not concerned, but I think in the future, as this gets more widespread, as people start using it on their own, these are definitely things that need to be completely laid out and be completely transparent with, because there is a, you know, it is in the brain. It's a fascinating technology, but not everyone has great intentions. So I'd love to see some work around this in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to see the sorts of things that you've been able to do. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program, Noland.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let's just take you to Bilbao, where it's the final minutes till the final whistle in the Europa League, where Tottenham is taking on Manchester United. And Rob, over to you.
Just seconds to go, it seems, here in Bilbao. Tottenham Hotspur leading Manchester United 1-0 in the Europa League final. The only goal of the match, the only shot on target for Tottenham, coming from Brennan Johnson in the 42nd minute. Manchester United have been searching for that equaliser. It hasn't come. They thought they had it. Rasmus Højlund had a header, but it was so acrobatically cleared off the line by Tottenham defender Mickey van der Ven. It preserved Tottenham's 1-0 lead, so slender. And the Tottenham fans, who haven't seen their team win a trophy since 2008, finally counting down the anxious moments till they believe this long trophy drought can end. It has been so agonising for them. So many thousands have come here to Bilbao. It's been an English takeover of the Basque Country. Fans of Manchester United as well, desperate to see a season of misery end in some silverware, but it doesn't look like that will be the case. Two of the teams that have suffered such terrible Premier League seasons, hovering above the relegation zone, chasing a piece of silverware, and with it, there'll be qualification for the Champions League. And that brings quite a bounty as well. It could be worth £100 million. But we are in the final moments. We're deep into injury time now here in Bilbao. Tottenham with that 1-0 lead. And the final seconds, waiting for the final whistle to blow here. You can see the Tottenham fans who are watching at their stadium in North London. So many thousands are packed into there to watch this moment of history for the North London club. A moment they've been waiting so long for, having to now endure this injury time to see if they can hold on to this most slender of leads. They've been on the back foot throughout this entire second half, trying to fend off those waves of United attacks, but fortunately they are facing one of the weakest Manchester United sides in recent years. And what a moment this would be for Tottenham's Australian manager, Ange Postecoglou, who's been written off by so many. Had to insist yesterday he was like a clown in response to one article on a website. But now he could be finally winning that trophy for Tottenham. He said he'd deliver it in the second year. He's won trophies for Australia. And now the noise behind me in the Bilbao Stadium. Trying to just figure out if it has just finished. We have had just to step outside to conduct this broadcast. There was a corner that came in, swinging in, and we're seeing a lot of anxious Tottenham faces. The players, they're waiting to surge into celebrations. It's been such a long period of time. To think how long it's been since Tottenham won a trophy last in 2008, lost 4 finals since then, including a Champions League final in 2019. There wasn't even WhatsApp back when Tottenham last won a trophy. And there's a lot of injury time. This is and it's full time here in Bilbao. Tottenham Hotspur have beaten Manchester United. They've won the Europa League. Spurs ending a 17-year trophy drought. All the years of torment over for Tottenham, ending finally for them in celebration. For Tottenham, a first European trophy since 1984.